Hello and welcome. I'm Jordan Carter, curator and co-head of the curatorial department here at DIA, and I'm thrilled to welcome you to this evening's Sam Gilliam Award program featuring Sheela Gowda, our second annual award recipient, who will be joined in conversation with Rattanamol Singh Johal. Before I introduce this evening's speakers, I'd like to begin with a brief overview of the award itself. In 2023, DIA launched the Sam Gilliam Award, made possible by the extraordinary generosity of Annie Garlack and the Sam Gilliam Foundation. This award, which will be given annually over the next decade, consists of $75,000 of unrestricted funds to be granted to an artist living anywhere, working in any medium, who has made a significant contribution to the field and from whom the award would be transformative. The awardee is given the opportunity to participate in a public program here at DIA, which is taking place here tonight with Sheela. This significant award initiative reflects the critical support that grants provided Gilliam in developing his practice, as well as his own incredible and lifelong generosity supporting fellow artists. We are grateful for Annie and the Foundation's continued trust in DIA in administering this award. It is truly an honor. I would also like to take a moment to thank my colleagues here at DIA, in particular Liv Cunaberti, who was integral in the administration of the award, as well as Kim Golding and Max Tanone for producing this evening's program. Sheela was selected from a long list of artists nominated by an international array of leading museum curators and directors. This list was then reviewed by a jury of 5, including myself, Courtney Martin, the director of the Rauschenberg Foundation, as well as independent curators Emiliano Valdez and Zoe Whitley, and of course, Annie Garlack, the president of the Sam Gilliam Foundation. We are deeply grateful to the jurors for their time, care, and criticality in our deliberations. Now, I am thrilled to introduce Sheela, who was selected due to her decades-long, consistently ambitious, and expansive practice. Known for her evocative, process-oriented works that blend painting, sculpture, and installation, Sheela often incorporates everyday, unconventional, and organic materials into her work, such as cow dung, hair, incense, and tar drums, that are imbued with cultural and political significance. Rooted in her observations of urban and rural life in South India, Sheela's practice investigates issues of labor, gender, and sociopolitical conditions shaping our contemporary society. I'm also pleased to introduce Sheela's interlocutor, art historian and curator Rattanamol Singh Johal. He is the inaugural Shireen and Afzal Ahmad Assistant Professor at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. Previously, he was the Assistant Director of the International Program at the Museum of Modern Art, New York, where he contributed to a number of collection acquisitions, managed the Contemporary and Modern Art Perspectives Initiative, the Primary Documents publication series, and worked on a number of acquisitions and exhibitions, including Staging Selves, which is currently on view, Video After Video, the Critical Media of Camp, which was also this year, War Remembers Me from 2024 to 25, and Signals How Video Transformed the World in 2023. Now, without further ado, please help me in welcoming Sheela and Rattan to the stage.
I would like to thank the family of Sam Gilliam, the Sam Gilliam Foundation, and especially Annie Garlack for having initiated this award, and to the jury for having selected me for the second year award. It's really a great honor, and I'm very grateful for the thought behind it, and the kind of inspirational aspect of it in terms of what one can do as an artist, not just in one's own practice, but also how one can share the good opportunities we have got through our lives. And I truly think it's a very inspiring act, and I'm happy to receive it. I thank the jury especially for having selected me from such a long list of artists, and I would like to thank the DIA Foundation for all their what can you say, generosity, and Jessica Morgan, who's also been somebody I have known for a while, and the friendly way of, in a way, receiving me and introducing me to this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheela. And I want to, of course, echo Sheela's thanks to the Sam Gilliam Foundation and to everyone at DIA who've been so incredible at organizing and bringing us together. And it's a real privilege. So a huge thank you also to Sheela. It's been very fun hanging out with you on long Zooms, planning this, and we hope to bring some of that to the evening. So I thought I would actually start with a quote from the citation for the award, which I thought really beautifully captured many aspects of the practice. It says, through her poetic yet politically charged installations, she transforms humble materials into powerful reflections on resilience, ritual, and the interconnectedness of human experience. There's a lot to unpack there, and I think the rest of this hour will be spent doing that. But a place to start for us is perhaps with a work that some of you might be familiar with, which is housed here in a collection, in the collection of MoMA in New York, and was prominently on view when the museum reopened in 2019 after an expansion. And I thought we could start to kind of move through some of the images from that installation, the work titled Of All People. And I invite you, Sheela, to sort of take us through the different elements in this work, to kind of understand how the kind of principles of this work developed over time, and what it is that we're actually looking at, especially for those who didn't have the opportunity to see it in 2019.
That's a lot to talk about, I think. But yeah, I started this it began firstly with the idea of using door frames and windows frames and opening up the door frame into a kind of a linearity. On one hand, you're talking about looking at these elements as abstract elements, that they are forms. Mm-hmm. On the other, they are what they were, which is a door frame. So when one looks at the door as something that is taken, separated away from its context, mm-hmm. it has a sense of passage, of going through, and where from where to where is something that a person really determines. And when you open up the frame, there is a certain, you're talking about certain kinds of freedoms as well, and freedoms which are not necessarily comfortable to have, because there's no kind of a basis for it. So, but like it, a lot of my work, sometimes elements come together, not because I'm looking for them, but I find things and I recognize there's potential for a reading with it, and that has happened firstly with the idea of using door frames and shutters, but also in the little dolls that one can see. Yeah, these are wooden dolls that are called Chandanada Gombe, which is a red sander figurines, which are traditionally used as it's not a god figure, it's not a religious figure, it's a man-woman figure. So it's in a way I had the license in a way to use it as a kind of I don't think I was stepping on anybody's toes by using it the way I was doing. But in the context of this one, the transition, the generational thing that has happened from, in the previous slide, from the what was a traditional thing to the last image, where you have them as, what interested me was the fact that it became a piece of wood, somewhere between something that is readable as a figure, and it is readable as a piece of wood, that is material. Mm-hmm. So that aspect is what interested me, and I used it as a kind of, in ways that sometimes I highlighted them as individual figures, mm-hmm. as kind of leaders in the, put up on a wall, or as mass, mm-hmm. and using the table, for example, an upside down table as a kind of a piazza where you have a kind of you talk about you kind of refer to cityscapes and of civilizational aspect of it as well.
Yeah, I mean that really brings me to kind of this larger principle, I guess, in some ways, as I look at many of the works and as we've been having these discussions, thinking about kind of the way in which observation, firstly, looking at the ways in which certain aspects of modernity and modernization have changed your immediate environment, indeed the door frames, the windows, the kind of architectural transformation that's happening in a city like Bangalore at all times is certainly registered here. But
they come out of houses that are demolished and are being recycled as things. So and the fact that they are also from a certain time, they come with certain kinds of colors, which are these vernacular colors, this blue. So this is not something that I especially chose, but they happen to also gel together very well, but these are really vernacular colors that are used on door frames traditionally.
Right. And I mean, taking this through this process of then planning a kind of transformation, a noted transformation of the materials, I think we have a set of images really showing you the ways in which there is this kind of semiotic.
The one aspect I would like to talk about this particular thing is the reason it interested me was the small figurines no longer were. I asked the shopkeeper, so why are they being sold? Apparently, they have become more like a voodoo dolls, and they are mass produced. And mass production really means like the maker, in inverted commas, is using a tool and very quickly a chisel to make the eyes, the nose, and the body as just designating thing. So it creates individuals, and that was what interested me as well. That each of these little figurines had an individual personality. So and these are like some of the close-ups that you can see. They're quite. Some of them funny, some of them deadly serious.
Yeah. And I guess it is also, in many ways, the kind of zooming in on these details, but also the larger installation itself. And maybe that's a good segue for us to kind of talk about an image like this, which we put at the front of the next series of works that we wanted to discuss. And here again, I know this might take a second, but it's worth discussing the kind of source image, something that we talked about as something you encountered out in the world, and to maybe present what is actually going on here before we begin to look at this body of work coming up.
I think when you're coming from a country like India and you show an image like this to an audience somewhere else, the immediate assumption is that you are talking about the poor, or you're addressing in a way something about them, which is a danger that I don't want to get into. I coming from where I come from, which is definitely a far more privileged background. I don't feel I have the license in a way to talk about the people who are not in that same position. But having said that, I think these were little colonies that I came across near my house, and these are colonies they're temporary shelters made by road work, people who make the road, which is like the tarring of the road. And what fascinated me about this particular image was that that these little shelters were not determined by the need of the body, meaning the shelter was not long enough for you to stretch your legs. It was not not high enough to stand up, but it was determined by the material, which is the drum. So the byproduct of those drums that were emptied by making the roads were flattened under the road roller and propped up, and the height of the house, therefore, was the height of the drum. The length of the house shelter was the length of the flattened drum. So, and that aspect really fascinated me, and I wanted to put the same kind of restrictions on myself as an artist. So that became for me the prototype. So what you see here on the bottom part is the prototype house, which is the, you know, determined by the sheets, drum sheets, and the height, and flattened. Like I went through the same process. I made them flatten it under the road roller. But then, having done that, I think as an artist, you also, I as an artist feel needs to be a transformation of what you get from outside. What do you do with it? You know, there's something that has to evolve. And that to me was the most difficult part, because I went through, the top part is like a double story thing, which, so it has a darkness inside. So I went through many ideas as to what is it that I can do in there that will take this aspect of materiality and the confinement of the material. What can I do with it? So I went through sketches, and in the sketches I explored the many aspects. But in the end, it was a very, very simple idea, which was I used a sheet, the same sheet, and again, when I was doing that, the restrictions meant that I was not going to be cutting up the sheet into smaller bits and welding it or bringing in another element. So I used one of the sheets as a kind of I cut them in a way that I could prop them up like in origami. So it became like a colony of the same things, but in smaller size. And the idea of the confinement of that, the metal, the darkness, all I had to do was make holes in the ceiling so that when you looked up, what you saw was a starry sky. So in that sense, on one hand you have the restrictions of material, and on the other you have something like infinity that you can experience. And underneath is this colony of little houses.
Yeah, and this is also an example of a material that you worked with over a number of years across different works, and we have some images, of course, here of your...
These are some of the ideas that I explored till I came to the more simple one.
Exactly, and then to also share...
This is Dark Room.
Yeah, the first one was titled, I should say, A Blanket and the Sky,
yeah.
From 2004. This is Dark Room, and
I think the difference between the first and the second is in the Dark Room, I've actually also used the drum as a whole. And also it is something, again, in all these drum works, the prototype still stays. There's a prototype there, you know, at the bottom, which you actually crawl into. And once you're inside, you can stand up. And you can look up, and you are in the darkness, and you're looking at the starry sky. And you have the tar under your feet as well.
Yeah. And I mean, this is also just really fantastic to see in many ways the process, but also the kind of difference in terms of the genealogy of the sculpture. I think in some ways, encountering a work like this for many people in a gallery space or in an exhibition creates or produces, like every work, certain associations. But I think as we look at the process and we think about how different this is from certain uses of industrial materials, particularly in post-minimalist sculpture, you have a sense really here of how also hands-on you were. We talked about this in some ways as well, looking at the scale of these sculptures. One might imagine that Sheela was contracting a truck company to go around picking up these tar drums, but in fact it was her...
that's my little car.
Her little car.
Which has basically transported the entire dark room. But of course not, I cannot do that anymore. The police get me, my car is not licensed properly, and so I can't do any of that, but I still have this car. That's my one and only car. But what I wanted to talk about also about the material is that when I use it, I want to use it in a way that its past is not erased. That is, it's kind of history that it has already, having gone through that process. I want to respect that. I want that not to be erased. So, which is why when I work at an idea as to how I use these, what I have, that has been the most difficult part. How do I respect that? How do I not erase and put my will over the material will, and also not force it to do things that it seems not part of its character.
Perhaps this is another work from 2008 called Kage Bangara, where you also introduce the tarp that is often used to protect these temporary homes from rain and the elements. And again, here the encounter is within a kind of a contemporary art space that gives the work a different kind of reading, as I was alluding to. But I do want to go back to this point, unless you wanted to say something about that, Sheela.
No, I just wanted to. I'm conscious of the fact when I'm making this work that it is going to be in that kind of a contemporary space. It's not something that needs to be in that kind of, in a context from where it comes from. That it can read in ways that it's. I'm conscious of that fact. That modernist aspect of it, and that it's going to be perhaps in a white cube space.
Yeah. I did want to kind of push the point about the kind of transformation of materials, particularly thinking about, as you said, not erasing their past, their uses, the ways in which they've been worked on by many different people over time, and you kind of join that relay. I do want to bring us to, these are just a few other images of the works with the tar drums, but I think this is also a good segue for us to talk about the series of works you did with the thread and needles between the late 90s and the late 2000s, which iterated in different ways, a series that began with the work being called "And Tell Him of My Pain," and ultimately it's just called "And," but there is in this work an incredibly laborious process of transformation, and it would be, I think, interesting and important to kind of unpack for everyone here what that performance in a way for you was in your studio in making a work like this, and where the idea of that transformation and the materials involved emerged.
Well, I started this work, the first image that we have, which is of a simple drawing, a sculptural drawing, somewhere between sculpture and a line drawing. And it was not very ambitious in that sense, but it started off as a kind of a departure to make something that was much more easy when I had my first child, or rather one and only child. And so I got much more ambitious, where I thought of it as occupying an entire room and not just a wall, and that it would not only be a sculptural drawing, but also that the people response to it would be much more a walk through the space, so which is why I took on the ambitious work of making rope, which was each of them was 350 feet when it's finished, and there are two of those. But I think the most important part of it was the process, which was self-induced pain, you can say. It's something that it was really laborious. So the work involves, on one hand, if you see it installed, it takes on different forms, like depending on the space. I sometimes wind it up into these kind of knotted kind of forms, or I drape them, work from the ceiling or on the wall. But the elements that exist, I mean, that is remains is the one hand of this cord are the needles, and on the other end is the tail part, which is the end of the strings. So for me, it was important that whatever I went through in the making of it was not necessarily something that I talk about or show in an exhibition, but that's something that you induce after having seen the work. So that part was, I'll have to go to the process to say what was the process. Basically, I took a ball of thread which was 750 feet, and I put a needle through it, and I think we can go, yeah. I put a needle through it, and then I tied it up one end, and I go up and down my studio till that 750 feet of string is stretched out. And then I take the needle which I put in the beginning and take it to the center point, and then the center point, and I do that with 120 balls of thread. And having done that, I like, you want to stitch something, you put the needle through a thread and you double it up and then you start stitching. But except I'm doing this with 750 feet, so I've come down to the center point, which is a 375 feet point, and then I double it up, and then I start the process of anointing it together into making it into that thing. So the most important part was that it was something that I walked about 8 kilometers a day, going up and down in my studio, and the fact that at the end of the day, that the cord that I made with it, the needles had been through the body of that. So even if I encountered a knot, I would go back. I wouldn't use that thread. So it was a private performance in a way, and it was about my own integrity in how I made it, because nobody was really watching what I was doing. I didn't just put them at the end and tie them up. So this is my space after the work was done. It was about 3 months of work on 14 hours a day or 16 hours a day. So, but when I'm having done that, it's not that I was saying, okay, this is what it means and this is, but there were elements that came into my mind, associations that I made when the work was lying there, with all the red, the floor red in the walls red and drips like blood. So I was, certain thoughts came to my mind. So in this case, my husband, who is Swiss, and my son, who was young at that age when I was doing this particular version of it, I thought, let me stage them. Let me make a kind of a performative aspect to it. So my husband became the Hiranyakashipu in the Hindu mythology, and my son became Prahlada. And the Hiranyakashipu Prahlada story is of the father and the son who are antagonistic to each other. The son is a Vishnu worshipper, and the father is very upset because Vishnu has done a lot of harm to him, and he can't tolerate the fact that the son is such a die-hard Vishnu worshipper. So he challenges him and he says, like, show me your God. But in the meantime, the Hiranyakashipu has taken a boon from Brahma that he cannot be killed by any creature that's come from a womb. He cannot be killed by day or night. He cannot be killed with a weapon, man-made weapon. He cannot be killed inside or outside. So basically, he's made himself very invincible. So when he challenges the sun, and the sun says, is he in this column? And so then out comes Narasimha. This is the avatar of Vishnu, who is half lion, half man. He comes out of the column and he puts the Hiranyakashipu. It's a very violent scene. And for a while, I have been very interested in looking at mythology from the from the kind of violent imagery that it evokes, and a lot of them it is kind of made into a, it's mythology. So you can talk about, you can deal with violence, but I try to put the light on that and see that it is actually, it's not as benign kind of imagery. So I've done that with my cow dung, which we can talk later. But anyway, he puts him across his thing. He uses his claws to rip him. It's not a weapon, man-made. He puts him on the threshold, which is neither inside nor outside, and it is by dusk, which is neither night or day. He gets disemboweled, and the intestines are brought out, and so this is what I did with and just as a reference for myself.
Do you want to say a word about the actual red, the material of that?
Yeah,
paste as well?
the red is basically kumkum, and it's not like I'm trying to refer to the religious aspect of kumkum, but it happens to be a natural pigment made from turmeric and lime, and it's got more body than any other, and I love the color, that particular red. But I'm not making a reference to its religious aspect, and I love the smell.
Yeah. I guess this is making me think, of course, of this point that you're making about the kind of power and violence of images, which is something that interests you at a level that may not always be completely evident to a viewer of the sculpture, again in a gallery in the way that we saw the installations, but is certainly integral to the kind of layers, the personal, the performative, the mythological. And one of the things that I was very interested in, and as we chatted, was really great to explore with you, Sheela, was the fact that you have also remained a painter. Your original formation was in painting, and that's not an aspect necessarily that we talk about enough, I think, and in terms of the politics of images, and particularly of the source material that we are starting to see in many ways, is a very particular politics that you exercise. I thought this is an opportunity for us to look at some of the works that are constructed using images in the media and the popular press that are appropriated by you, overworked, represented, and here's a work called Sanjay Narrates, which perhaps is a good starting point for us to explore this aspect of your practice.
Yeah, there's just one part I think is important to say with the previous thing, is that this mythology thing is not just for the sake of it, but it has a resonance with the present in terms of the way we consider the other. That you are a worshipper of Vishnu, I am not a worshipper of Vishnu, I'm a worshipper of this or I'm that, and there's a certain intolerance built into that, So that aspect is something that's important, that comes through in many of the other works as well. So Sanjay narrates, I started out as a painter. I studied painting in college. I didn't imagine that I would be working with materials. That happened. But there came a time when I could not continue with painting. It did not seem to address all the needs that I had, especially when the political situation was becoming really dire, very right-wing, fundamentalist, majoritarianism rather, at that point, which is now center stage, by the way. And so I felt that painting was not able to address, especially working with oil. So I stopped painting. I started work with other materials, and other materials meant they were really found material. I could no longer. It's not something that I imagined, but it became the starting point for me, a kind of an inspiration, a kind of a moment to articulate things around it. So in that sense, my approach to painting as well changed. So I was no longer just working in a kind of expressionist kind of a way. I was looking at found material in terms of imagery as well, and bringing back the painting through that. So one of the images that I responded to, and most often my response is always emotional. I look at something and there's something about that image that moves me, but I don't know why. So that why question is when I look deeper into that, and usually there'll be a formal aspect in that image as well. It's not just explicit imagery. There's something quite hidden, quite subtle, and there's a formal integrity to that image that I respond to, and I try to bring that into my practice as well. So this is an image that of Palestine. I think it's from 2003 that I responded to. It was like some kind of a, Renaissance painting, the way it was thing. And I looked at it and, considering how much violence we are exposed to in terms of imagery, especially now, and we become numb from it. It was not explicit what was happening in the image, but when you looked closer, I saw that it was actually of this woman who was dressed in a red tracksuit, obviously in the middle of work. She is wearing an apron, and she has a child holding like that, who is also in a red tracksuit, and there's a man who is coming out, from front of a military van. I don't know whether he's the father or a soldier, and there's these agitated people around them. There's a woman running with her hands outstretched, and there's another woman in black who looks completely, So when I looked very closely, did I realize that the child is the one that has been shot through, right through the center of the thing. So, and you see that if you go to the, these are some of the, so what I did was, for me, I felt that I felt like a voyeur in a way to encounter this image in a newspaper while I'm having my cup of tea in the morning or having my breakfast or keeping my plate over it. So I did not want to pass on that same image in whole. And also the idea that you are looking at an image and you're trying to understand the politics of it. And at that point, the politics of, the whole this thing of Palestine had been going on for such a long time, and so somewhere you lose track of what exactly is going on. So I decided in a way to fragment the image and make it into, you try to, physically, when you try to look at an image and you tend to go closer, it doesn't make it any clearer. It tends to just blur in the act of also zooming in, say, in a camera. So I compartmentalized it, and I made this kind of thing in a way to show that there is a certain distance that one has to what we receive, and and also it was underlined by the title I gave the work, which is Sanjaya, which again comes from Mahabharata, the epic, where Sanjaya is this is a charioteer, and he has a divine vision, ability to see far off things, and he is asked by Dhritarashtra, who is blind king, to tell him what is happening. He's very agitated because his children are at war with his cousins, and he's very agitated, and he's asking Sanjaya, like, tell me what's happening out there. So Sanjaya, through his divine vision, can see what's happening out there in the war field, and he narrates it to Dhritarashtra. So in a way, like, I felt like when I looked at this, and I think, what is this cameraman doing, in Palestine? What are his ideas? What is he thinking when he's encountering and taking a photograph of this? And this whole transference of this through newspapers to us, and are we the blind kings? So there were a lot of little. This is the point at which the blood is, the child has been shot. So it's a very, very subtle image, but I think I mean, I thought at it at many levels, really. And there's a little bit of blood. So the small things in that image that were very moving. So there are 14 images of this.
Just take it back to the...
Yeah.
As we move through this, I will also, maybe for the sake of time, Sheela, we won't talk about this image from the same, with many of the same principles of found imagery, but I actually want to go back to the point about not being able to continue as one did, certainly with the series of work we just talked about, but also going back to the early 90s, and you talked about being trained as a painter, but at this point in the situation in India with the political situation, it was untenable for you to just continue to work with the materials and the tools that you had at your disposal with the apparatus of painting, and you started to kind of explore the significance of both a certain set of materials, here cow dung, but also a way of working in space, which is, I think, very significant for us to kind of revisit in relationship to all of the more recent works that we've been looking at. And so perhaps you want to take us through these works from 1993, and talk about both the kind of resonance of cow dung and the significance of that material, as well as some of the kind of experiments you were making formally at that point.
Well, there were two very important changes that happened, and quite radical for that matter. One is that I was a figurative painter mostly before that, and secondly, in a way, for a while, I did not use paint, but went into use of cow dung, which is a very, very radical thing to do. Not only change into a sculptural kind of material, use, but to change, to use something like cow dung. And it was quite provocative in a way, but that was not my intention. It's cow dung is in India not just cow shit, but it has religious significance because it's from the cow, which is worshipped, and by some, not all, everybody see it that way. So the cow dung is also considered sacred, and it is used by women. It is used as a material for putting it on the floor so that dust doesn't rise. They make things with it. They pat it into small things, and they use it as fuel. So it had such a lot of use in daily life. It was such an obvious kind of a material to pick up, but what interested me was its range of use. One is, on one hand, it's shit, on the other, it is sacred. So I was interested in that extreme meaning of the material. And the other aspect of the change was, of course, coming from not necessarily that I stopped using representational imagery, but just that at that point the body was not as so obviously was not the means as much as the form of the body. So I had parts of the body, I had gaps between the body and the arm, or I began to explore form for its sake, like what I learned from my teacher about that the line has inherently a quality that doesn't change. That you can either embellish it with something and make it into representational readability, or it can still be a line, but the way its rigor or its tensions, all that, or its calmness is already inherent in the form, which is my beginning of looking at abstraction in that sense. So in that sense, abstraction is not coming from the idea that it is, form only, but it also behind it has a certain representational thing that it could be representational as well. So that's when I did a whole body of work that was with cow dung. Started out as a painter, so my images were very painterly and on the wall, and slowly it began to become more collage-like, and then it became much more sculptural, which is when I really came into the aspect of being more using sculptural elements in my work. And of course, then it led to other materials. So these are all like, this, for example, is cow dung squeezed in the hand and rolled in pigment and tied up.
A work called Gallant Hearts.
Gallant Hearts.
And that brings me to, again, the kind of question of form and formal contrast that you were talking about, kind of using things that you have observed in the world, certain forms, certain lines, certain ways of using and repurposing materials, and then bringing those into a kind of conversation with the development of form itself. I want to make that clearer in some ways by bringing up this image, another source image, as it were, which was the kind of origin of another very significant installation work you did called Behold, which is itself, as I said, a kind of study in contrasts and in kind of developing principles and massing and arrangements in space using two very simple materials, let's say. But maybe this deserves a bit of an explanation before we share what Behold looks like, for those who've never seen it.
Well, this is something that is very common, not necessarily all over India. It's where they don't necessarily use the hair rope. I always presumed I looked at these hair ropes in the early 90s when I started out with cow dung. I didn't know it was made of human hair. And it was only much later when I came to know that it was made of human hair that it suddenly became very meaningful, because why would you want to do that? Why would you want to put this thing on a bumper? And so when I began to question that, I found that on one hand you are in charge of a vehicle, automobile, and you are in control of that automobile. But there is a vulnerability in us that you need to put on a talisman on your vehicle that things can go beyond your own control, and that there's a fear of that kind of the unknown. And so this is used as a talisman on the bumpers of cars. So which is when I also began to use these are ropes that are available. It's not something that I made, but there is a big history to the making of the rope itself, because this is little bits of hair. They're not long lengths of hair collected from pilgrimage places where people go to offer their hair as a sacrifice. So I feel that the use of this rope on a vehicle meant that the sacrifice had already been made. So you are not going to be the sacrifice to, So this, I felt, was one of the reasons why it was being used. Anyway, it's a big industry. I can't go too much detail into it. But the fact that this is made of little bits of hair from all kinds of people, young, babies, old men, old women, and, like different communities and castes. And so for me, it became a collective. It became a collective of human, like people in general. So once I had that, I could speak. This became, in a way, humanity in a way, or human perception, or against the more industrial kind of a product, like a metal bumper. And so I explored the idea, what kind of bumper, and so this was my studio during that process of thinking. And also, how do you use it, densities of form, massing it together, sometimes linear, sometimes tension. So I was very much particular about wanting to hang these bumpers so that what is industrial and hard and seemingly invincible is held up by these little bits of hair. So the element of this work is like two things. One is hair rope. This has about 1,000 meters of hair rope in it, and the bumpers. So once I have them, they are articulated in the space, which is true of most of my installations, that the basic elements remain the same, but they respond to the space. So they're space responsive rather than
site specific. Yeah.
These are in 3 different locations, so the hair is played out differently.
Yeah, and that, I mean, just to again push a little bit this idea of ritual that is somewhere both integral to the work, but also there is an effort always to kind of get away in some ways from the ritual uses of these materials. And I think we also want to think about ritual in a much more expanded way, not to just think about it as always related to religious or sacred events, but also kind of everyday rituals, daily use rituals, the way in which life is changing, and you have been an observer in many ways of what becomes outmoded in terms of those rituals, and that becomes in some way the basis for another work which exhibits a similar sensibility. I think the principle of gathering, massing, composing the work, and it being it moving from one space to another, and in that sense retaining something about its core elements, but also transforming in terms of the experience that one might have with it. What are we looking at here, Sheela?
I think when you're talking about ritual, I would like to talk why I try to go away from its in that sense. Of course, as I said, I don't want to negate its history, so I don't try to break it up. But I think abstraction, I look at it as form as well. And in this particular work, these are grinding stones, spice grinding stones. The inner stones are not used here. I was looking at them as these blocks of granites, all of them having this hole in the middle. And these were stones that I found very like abandoned, or rather pushed out of the house. There's a long story to why they are taken out and why they're not broken up, because it's considered to be Lakshmi, which is the goddess of wealth, and it's a fertility symbol. So people don't want it because they're modernizing their houses. They don't want to sit and grind in the house like this. So they want to use a mixer, in the kitchen. So they don't want it, but at the same time they are afraid to let go, to break it up, because it means something to them. So a lot of the time they're just pushed out. Like you see in this final image there, they just pushed out of the house. Then they travel a little bit, and then they go under a electric pole. Like you see in this particular image, whereas the first image where those markings underneath that, it's like they kind of go and sit in this non-space. So nobody sees them. So when I told people I found 60 stones in a 2-kilometer area, people couldn't believe, because you don't see them anymore, because they found this niche, or they find this kind of, they'll become a little bit like a cemetery of them. For example, where I found 3-4 of them sitting together. One goes there and another one joins it, and then so it has a life. So I gathered these, and at the same time I did not want it to be just this kind of anthropological object, but I wanted to draw attention to its abstract form, and which is why I used the grid to draw attention to that. So what was shown in the first image was at Kochi, which is Kochi Biennale, which was a spice trading port, And so because these are redundant spice mixing stones, it made sense in a way to use it in that space. I used 200 of these stones, and when I had to move it, it was also about shifting customs. You know, you're moving from customs of usage from inside a house to the outside of the house into the street. And here you were looking at customs of a different kind. You're moving over the sea and coming into another space, into another culture. And here, this was at Hangar Bikoka, where it's such a huge space, and so I tried to make that collision happen by a kind of a tectonic kind of a collision. So there is that space where the stones are resisted by the column, so they start to pile up under the base of the thing. So those are just basically such responsive acts of mine, but the work in a sense remains the same. And there I use the grid on the floor, in another or on the wall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And indeed, of course, in Kochi, the additional kind of layer of meaning from both the city's history in the spice trade, but also, in fact, the venue itself being the headquarters of a major spice trading company that went out of business.
Yes.
So that is another aspect. I want to take us then from here, Sheela, to one of your more recent large installations, What Yet Remains, and perhaps as a kind of final provocation question to really ask you to think with us about how you approach abstraction, that term which seems to emerge in many different ways in your work, as something found in the world, as something that is done as abstraction in terms of labor and production. And so this is, again, a study in a work that really engages many of those aspects of abstraction, and so this might be a place that we get to talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, there is an aspect of minimalism, there is a modernist aesthetics that one obviously sees in these things, and obviously it is not something that I'm just quoting. I do kind of appreciate that. You know, I love the aspects of modernity in that sense, of modernist language, but it's not enough for me that that's what it is all about. So it would be meaningless for me if it did not have that history to it. So in that sense, the abstraction is only a surface. You can call it a little bit of a red herring, you know, that it you kind of get the viewer in a way to look at it. Oh, it looks very modernist and, you know, all that, but my story behind it will be much more about the process, its origins, the history of that material, and how it has been used. So in this context, again, these are drums coming out of drums, flattened drums, but these are like already colored drums. And the reason why they have these little holes is because you can see the bowls. This is what's called a bandli. It's a very iconic thing in a construction for taking construction materials in a construction site. It's something that's like the woman at the back here, like she's wearing. It's just enough to be carried on the head. Singular, you don't need help to pick it up and put it on the head and walk with it. So it's just that perfect size, you know. It's a very beautiful bowl. And I came across this bandli making place by incident, and I was, of course, really fascinated. And so it's important to say that when I find people doing what they do, it's important for me to insert myself even in that process, that I don't want them to do something that they don't normally do. You know, that I'm not going to a craftsperson and saying, come on, I want to use your skill, so you make me something else that they don't necessarily do. And I think it's something that's very important for me to say that, because you can you can basically, it becomes opportunistic if you, in any other way, I feel, to make something that is exploitative. I find it a little exploitative, and so in this sense, I am inserting myself in what is already happening, but in certain subtle ways. So they take the sheet and they make 8 disc cutouts of it, and whatever is left is usually junked and for further recycling. So all this is, all of my works is a kind of remnants of a process. So and the bandli is also coming from a drum which was transporting wood glue from another country, but again it is recycled to make something, and the what else is left is also again recycled. So I really respond to that I am also in part of that process of recycling. So this, for example, in the center image is the leftover after all the discs are things covered with glue, which is difficult. And these discs are taken and they're hand pressed into making these bandlis. And the final act of making this bandli is when it is the edges are beaten and so that it's not sharp. One of the insertions I made here, one of my interventions was, I've been very fascinated with the back square. Don't ask me why. I still haven't figured out, but I'm obsessively working with it. But I think somewhere, without having to, I don't know, without having to explain, I identify it, I think, with the European Western modernism, or what it, like almost like a kind of a end, it seemingly end to what, it can't go any simpler than that, kind of informally. So I painted the black square on one of the discs, the previous image, and I didn't paint it after the bandli was made. I wanted it to go through the process of being beaten, pressed into this form, beaten, and basically take on its body the whole idea of labor in a way. So while that particular bandli was being, the edges were being folded, the boy put his very dirty foot on the thing, and it was fortunate for me that I took this photograph, because I think it's a very, very meaningful photographs which kind of says a lot about my approach to not only the formal aspects of it, but also the meaning that I wish to bring about. A meaning that's not necessarily very easy to kind of say, this is what it is, this is not what it is not, but something that one can think about. And for me, this particular image is a very meaningful one.
Yeah. Also a kind of end that is already a beginning of another transformation.
Yeah.
On that note, I think we are out of time for this evening. But if there are any last words, Sheela, that you want to say.
There are many things you want to say, but of course you didn't say it, but I think it's quite a bit.
Yeah, we've had a chance to share a significant number of works, but there is, of course, much, much more.
I think the problem with my work is that if I just can't say, okay, this is this work and this is the material. There's always some story behind it. And those stories are not visible when you actually go into the space and you look at the work. It's not something that I also talk about, but I feel it's something that you can intuit and if you look long enough, or
or if we have the pleasure of having you with us, as we did this
if
evening.
I can blabber. Yes.
Thank you all again for being here, and thank you, Sheela.
Thank you, Rattan.